Great audience we have. My name is Graham Churchill. I'm the business leader for IBM Bluemix, IBM's innovation platform in Canada. Really want to thank you all for being here. If you're here yesterday, you might have heard some of my opening remarks about what IBM is doing in the area of design and technology. We actually have a long history in this area, but we're actually putting an awful lot of focus on it right now. We're actually hiring 1,500 designers globally, and that's for a very specific reason. And the specific reason is that technology is now, or design is now at the heart of what will happen with technology in the future. When you think about the disruptive companies of today, like Uber and Airbnb, you know, they're not doing anything particularly special, right? It's hotels, you know, taxis, things like that. That's not really that interesting. What is interesting is that they have created a whole way of interacting with you as a user, and that has actually changed markets. And that is the future of where our technology is going. It is about interactive design and making technology invisible to you and how you will use that technology to weave it into all of the things that you do in your lives. The jobs of the future, there are probably three major skills that you really want to have going forward. One is to be entrepreneurial, okay? And there's a big focus on that. You see that with a lot of startups. But that's not enough. You also have to be looking at programming. Programming skills are absolutely key to this. But the third one is design. And I would say that if you have skills in any two of those areas, or any one of those areas, you're probably set. If you have skills in two or all of them, you have the makings of being a superstar. And that's really the theme that we want to get on today as we talk about our topic, which is about applying cognitive computing into technology and design. So the first thing I want to kind of point out is that, you know, branding and marketing is always about standing out from the crowd. And, you know, the days, I think, have gone where you can depend upon advertising as a means for promoting your products. Actually, for quite a long time, we've actually said that advertising itself is not actually the greatest way to actually promote a product. Publicity is actually one of the best things. But beyond that, it's also about interaction. It's about being able to understand your end user and to be able to provide understanding what the end user is doing at the moment, and then providing them something to engage with at that point in time. There are three transformation shifts that at IBM that we're focused on. The first is data. So data, we often talk about data as being the new natural resource, or the new oil. And all of us who are familiar with what Google has done with data and actually taking all of your data and then applying all kinds of, actually making money on it in one way or another. But really, data is transformative to industries. You think about what happens in the healthcare space, for instance. So, you know, the healthcare space in particular is one of those industries where you kind of look and you say, well, wait a minute. I went to that doctor and I had a problem, and they kind of said that what they thought the problem was, and they gave me a subscription. Do they record all of that data, and do they compare it with every other person who has come through with those symptoms? No. But if you could aggregate that kind of data and get a kind of an overarching view, you would be able to actually address some of the major diseases in the world. So data is important, and data can be applied in almost every industry that you work in. The second one is cloud computing. And cloud computing, what it has done for us is it has made our data available anywhere we are, in whatever way and means we're looking at it. And that's also a very powerful concept. It's also a way of being able to take data that's in the cloud and put it together, weave it together to get a much bigger picture. And it creates a whole bunch of new business models. So at IBM, we talk about something we call the API economy. And the API economy is where people take their functionality, their capability, and make it available for others to weave together with other things. And so when you do that, you start to actually create all kinds of new business models. The third one is engagement. The concept of of actually engaging with people. And this is where we're kind of at the theme of what we want to talk about here today. That idea of design or engagement as design. The ability to be able to work with people whatever way that they're working with the world, whether they're working with a mobile phone, whether they're working with a website, whether you're working with some kind of Internet of Things devices, maybe some other wearable device that they might have, and then weaving all of that stuff together into an experience for the end user. Now, that's the key, is that the future of technology is all about interactive engagement. And for that, we have technologies like Watson, our cognitive computing platform, as a core technology. So let me just take a minute here to tell you what cognitive means, because cognitive is a bit of a funny term. What do we really mean by that? Well, it encompasses a broad set of technologies, artificial intelligence being just one of them. Some people will say, oh, it's all about AI. It's not. It's also about natural language processing. It's about machine reading. It's all kinds of different things. And why it's important is because it hits at some of the most fundamental things that we do as individuals. Think about every decision that you have ever made in your life. It's always based on something that you have learned. You've said, you know, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. Every time you make a decision, you're effectively applying a probability to something. You're basically looking at your world, the things that you've learned about your world, and then you've said, well, based on what I know, I think it's this. And think about the doctor example. You walk into the doctor sees you present something. They will look at it and they'll say, it's probably this. Now, they don't really know. They might assign it 50-50. Maybe they do know 100%. Maybe they only know 20%. But using that information then will lead you to something else, which can then help you to identify something else in a problem set to actually get to solve a problem. Now, what if you could do that? What if you could apply technologies that would apply this idea of probabilities, but instead of you looking at your data bank of knowledge, that you look at the data bank of knowledge of some expert somewhere? So what if there was a means for you to have all the answers to kind of a disease kind of set of presentations? I've got this, and this, and Watson comes back and says, well, based on that, it's this, and having some knowledge of that. Now, Watson isn't perfect. It's based on probabilities, and just as you learn and you make better decisions as you get older, the old concept of older and wiser, it means that you've got more experience, and that more experience hardens your ability to actually see things. Well, Watson works the same way. The more you teach it, the better it gets. But if you start to weave these things together into an idea or an interaction, you can start to create some incredible experiences for people. So that's what we want to talk about today. And for that, I want to just introduce a couple of ideas just to make that a little bit clearer. So I look after a platform. It's called Bluemix. Okay, it's our innovation platform, and it happens to sit on our SoftLayer cloud. And what it has in it has about 150 of these different services for kind of applying in one way or another. So you'll have a bunch of different services like Dialog. Dialog is a Watson service. It was the single service that was used several years ago when we first introduced Watson on Jeopardy, and it went to actually talk to the best Jeopardy contestants in the world. And it would answer the questions, what is this, and it would answer and got all the questions right. Well, most of them actually made a couple of mistakes around Toronto, which was one of the answers. But that was one service at the time. And since then, we've added all kinds of them. We've got things like personality insights. Personality insights, you can look at a briefing of what people have written, how they've written it, and so forth, and it will analyze that to give you a picture of, well, what is that person really like? Is it this kind of profile or this kind of profile? Now, if you knew that, you could actually make the next decision or make the next interaction even more powerful. kind of things you can do there. There are also things like Tone Analyzer. Tone Analyzer can help you to understand, well, it's not just what people say, it's how they say it, which speaks volumes. There's also trade-off analytics. Think about every time you've gone to buy a mobile phone, for instance. You're sitting there and you're going, I got an Apple thing, I got a Samsung, I got a Nokia, I got LG, I've got all kinds of different things, a BlackBerry. What choice do I make? I've got a budget that's this much, I want to do this, I want to do this. These are complex decisions. Everything in our life is a trade-off. So trade-off analytics helps you to do that. We also have things like language translation, speech-to-text, text-to-speech, just like kind of a Siri type of environment, but actually building it into your application itself. And then we have things like visual recognition, visual insights. And we have a new service called driver behavior, which you can actually use to help to understand the intricacies of how somebody is driving and so forth. Now, Bluemix, these are some of the Watson services. This is just a sampling, by the way. But it also provides a number of other things. It provides the ability to take things like mobile applications, things like our mobile-first platform, mobile quality assurance. Mobile quality assurance is really cool. It allows you to look at various apps that you might have on an app store and look at all the comments that are on the app store and then do a sentiment analysis on it to see where people are. And if you actually compare different companies with different brands, you can see where people will rate a brand, and it's often reflective in the brand itself. There's things like geospatial analytics to look at large areas in terms of going in and out of zones, presence insights, which helps you to follow through a physical space, and what's the insight in terms of how someone moves. Ustream, which is a video and ability to build interactive video, push notifications as well. And then we have other things. We have insights for Twitter, insights for weather, where you can look at a social media feed and get some insight about what's really going on there. Or gamification solutions, where you can create an interaction using a game. Or IoT, real-time insights, so you can see what's happening in a space. Or streaming analytics, predictive analytics. These are also just samples. The point, and I'm not trying to bring these up to sell you on this. I'm trying to actually make the point about the future being about interactions and how you would apply these things in a way to create a great experience. Now, to do that, the other thing that we do is we have a methodology called IBM Design Thinking, which is all about helping to figure out what is that experience, what is that interaction, how will it work, and we have a group up at Ryerson, at the Ryerson Digital Media Zone at Yonge Street and Dundas, where we will help to build applications and start with the disruptive ideas and take people through a methodology. And that methodology is available for all kinds of companies, whether they're small companies, startups, whatever. It's about how do I create great interactions. And we're really about teaching people how to do that. So, that's enough of that. What I'd like to do now is change the discussion a little bit and talk about the concept of applying these technologies to manage brands. And to do that, I have a great panel of people, so I'd like to invite them all up onto the stage so that we can see it. So, Yulia Vasilyeva is a founder and CEO of a company called Intelocate. And Yulia works actually with, actually have a seat over there. Yulia works with another area that we have, a thing at 185 Spadina Avenue, which is kind of a startup tank where we work with a lot of different startups. And she's got a platform for retail and head office and so forth. So she'll talk about that in a minute. The next one is Sabaa Quao. So Sabbagh, come on up. Sabbagh is the president and founder of Newsroom. It's Newsroom 365, isn't it? Correct. Yes, I think we've got a little mistake there. And Newsroom 365, he's going to talk about the social media platform that he's got for looking at brands and helping to manage brands better. The next one is Tanya, Collier, MacDonald. And Tanya is founder and CEO of Orenda Software Solutions. Orenda is also looking at brands and looking at it from the perspective of PR and PR management. And Tanya is also working with our group down on Spadina Avenue, the kind of the startup zone that we've got to help startups. And then I'd like to introduce a couple of IBMers here. First of all, I'd like to introduce Anton McConville. He is, what it says here, a designer evangelist, but he's really a developer advocate. An advocate for developers who many of you may be, in terms of, well, what works? What do you want? What do you want? And then we feed that back to our products and so forth. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce Rick Goldberg. Rick is a senior designer from our Bluemix garage environment on Yonge Street. And thank you, everyone, for coming over. So I'd like to just maybe start off just asking you some questions. Basically, let's start over here with Yulia and start saying, how's your technology and how does your approach drive innovation? Maybe you can just make a few words about what your offering is.
Hello, everyone. Hello. So our company is called Intelocate, and we're building a communication and execution platform for retail. And what our system does, it provides real-time visibility into the execution of the brand at the physical location. And what's never been done before, and what we're doing, we're building an ecosystem where brands, retailers, and vendors can collaborate with each other, which provides real-time insight into every single location at any time. And speaking about the engagement, allows everyone to collaborate in a very fast and reactive fashion. It's actually the first time we're talking and presenting system to the public, so it's a big day for us as well. And the bottom line of everything really is there's so many communications going on between the brands and the retailers. There's so much going on, and there are so many mediums and touch points that we're using in order to communicate the branding to the store and to the consumer. So what we're doing, we're building a platform that allows to bridge all of those pieces together and add very intelligent analytics to understand what else we can do and how we can improve all the processes to ensure that the brand is represented the best way it can.
That's fantastic. I think what Yulia is doing is going to be groundbreaking for an awful lot of the retailers in Canada, certainly not just in Canada, but perhaps in North America and worldwide.
Yes, we are working globally.
So I'd like to turn it over to Sabbagh now. And Sabbagh, so how is your technology and your approach helping drive innovation for people managing brands?
Newsrooms creates content exclusively for brands, and we only create content across social media channels. The complexity comes in where we're creating so much content on an ongoing basis that our editorial team and our analytics team at some point start to lose sight of how to pick out the narrative from the data. So what we're doing, we've launched a new publication called Tech Portfolio in collaboration with IBM Canada, and it's a social media-driven content marketing publication. And what we're going to be doing is, over time, using artificial intelligence to amplify the cognitive ability of the editorial teams and the analytics teams, because every piece of content there is built to drive engagement around a very narrow topic, startup ecosystems. So our future is really about working in collaboration with artificial intelligence to build editorial and analytic content.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I'll turn it over to Tanya now. And Tanya, as I said, she runs it's a PR agency. I think you've got a pretty interesting past and history. Maybe you can kind of tell us about what your products do.
So, yeah, interesting. I started out, I was working on a large remediation project, and at the time, my boss, whenever there was an issue, and we had probably issues every single day, I said I was putting out fires every day for a living, he would come to me and he would say, does this issue have legs? And based on what I knew, I would say yes or no. And at the time, I said, wouldn't it be great if we had a more sophisticated way of saying what the public relations industry does as a whole, as opposed to, yeah, it has legs. So I started to develop that, and what we do now, over the last couple of years, is we built a software program that has integrated social science. So the 6 factors of a really healthy relationship, which you can think about when you go home: trust, commitment, satisfaction, all those things that you're looking for in a relationship. We want to know whether or not conversations online could be broken down and to show whether or not trust levels were increasing or dropping, or commitment was improving, or people were really just unsatisfied with what products were being delivered or whatever. So that's what we did. So in real time, we're able to show leaders what the impact is of something. Say someone says something stupid in your organization, it's hit the internet, and you want to see what the impact is, what the repercussions are, and to be able to predict what's going to happen next in terms of your brand momentum. That's the software that we designed.
Fantastic. I think this is also interesting, and I can think of all kinds of use cases of, particularly of larger companies that have to kind of manage the profile, especially in the world where we see, one person says something wrong, and all of a sudden they get off a plane and they've lost their job. That's kind of where PR is going. I'd like to turn it now to Anton. Anton, you're a developer advocate for IBM, but you've also developed some of your own software for kind of managing in this kind of PR space, and maybe you could explain what that is.
Yeah, so with things like Twitter Insights, Personality Insights, and Tone Analysis, I consult with companies, the enterprise clients that IBM has, to figure out how they're framed, how their competitors are framed, how their campaigns are working. So it gives a new sort of dimension on it, being able to look at the natural language usage within social media. So that's kind of the angle.
Yeah, social media is the great untapped market now for actually understanding the world. So that's great. And so last, I'd like to turn it over to Rick, and Rick is our senior designer from the Bluemix Garage. Maybe you could just talk about the design thinking approach and what is it that you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So let me maybe explain a little bit of what the garage is. So when we talk about the cloud, the quote I always like to bring up, two guys in a Starbucks could have access to the same computing power as a Fortune 500 company, right? That's the power of the cloud, but that's really only half of the story. Just with a quick show of hands, who's heard the concept of two-speed IT or multi-speed IT? Is that anyone? Show of hands. Okay. Anyone who wants to know about it, come see me at the booth after. I'll explain it. But at the garage, we talk about multi-speed business, and if the IT organization has adopted the cloud and is able to innovate and do things at the speed that the cloud lets them work at, if the business is still taking 6 months to make a business decision, you really lose the value of being able to execute on the vision fast. What we do in the garage is we help organizations, large and small, really transform into one that could form this the common vision between the business side of the house and the IT side of the house, and have the entire organization work at the speed and that you're able to when you're leveraging cloud technologies.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So let's kind of open it up, the questions a little bit more. So we've got a bit of a base on what these guys do, and I'm sure that you're thinking, and I'm wondering myself, okay, can you give us some real customer examples? So, what kind of customers would you be working with? And you don't have to tell us the specific customers, but just give us that framework of what, what something is that you're working on.
So we're working with retailers, with brands, and with vendors. And so one of the use cases would be, let's say there's a new campaign launch at a national retailer across the entire Canada, and you need to know what's happening in the physical location. And as a brand, you really need to know whether the brand is being executed correctly. Usually there will be reps in the field or audit that has to be performed, hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes spent on this. We're providing the real-time insight directly into the location and the real-time collaboration, which also allows the brand or the retailer to connect to each other and do almost like an A/B testing on the physical location. So because everything is instant and happens right away, instead of trying to follow up with people via phone or email or any other Slack, WhatsApp, all kinds of channels, everyone can see what's happening. So you can change campaigns frequently. You can change campaigns within 1 day several times, and really get those insights and understand that maybe something is not working, so you can change it right away. Mm-hmm. So that would be one of the use cases that we could illustrate. I wish I could provide a more illustrative example with one of our existing customers, but we cannot, as we're under NDA and it's in the pilot stage right now. Okay,
that's great though anyway. So, Sabbagh, you're doing work with IBM. You're doing work on this tech portfolio. I think this is fascinating. Can you kind of elaborate on what that's all about?
Okay. When we create content for a brand, we always go after a very narrow topic because there's so much noise, there's so much content being created at any given moment that if you can go down to a narrow topic, it just gives you your first starting point on clarity. Startup ecosystems are an economic driver. So cities around the world are all competing hard. Everyone who is not Silicon Valley is basically trying to figure out how they're going to pull together the innovation and the startups that are going to help move a region forward. So the editorial team is creating content, looking at all the different startup ecosystem topics, and over time starting to figure out which topics are most important to the audience of startups, venture capitalists, and academics. And the publication continuously gets smarter in terms of we adapt the editorial calendar weekly and monthly based on the response of the audience. So we start off with an assumption on what we think the important topics are, but 3 months later, we definitely know more and are able to narrow down the focus and increase the performance of the content on an ongoing basis. Social media, as you said, is this new untapped terrain, and really it generates so many data points that it's actually the richest pool of data that we can work with an audience.
Now, this is a fascinating topic. This is actually one that is kind of close to my heart too. In the booth that we have, the IBM booth we have another startup there called Think DataWorks, and they've got a pretty cool tool. They're a Toronto-based company. They built a tool. It's on Bluemix. It's called Namera. And what it is it's an aggregation of all open data for all levels of government in North America. Now, it's an incredible source, actually, for building apps. Because if you were actually to use open data, for instance, and every level of government, talking about the competition that goes on, everybody wants to be a Silicon Valley. If you're a government, you're trying to drive some of this, open data is a really good point from governments. The problem is that every single government out there has their own portal. There are 40 of them in Canada alone, actually. And that data can be in all kinds of different formats and so forth, really, really difficult to use. So what Namera has done is they have aggregated all of that data, and they've created common search engines, common APIs, so that if you're building an application that is going to try to figure out something about using open data, it can pull it from one point, and then you could use that same application in another location. You've got consistency. And quite frankly, it's built in Toronto. We, as an ecosystem, have an incredible advantage to go and use that to become the next Silicon Valley. So that's actually something that would be a very good profile for us to look at for Tech Portfolio. Okay, so let's turn it over to Tanya now. Tanya, you've got some pretty good customers. Tanya's also got some customers she's not really allowed to talk about, but you can talk generally, I'm sure.
So some of the things that we're doing, we are gathering data on 3 major oil and gas companies. And the reason why we're doing that is, number one, for the data set. Number two, to develop an industry average and within the oil and gas companies. So one of the cool things that we're able to do, and Orenda does, and a lot of people wonder about, how we can customize language for different verticals. So oil and gas would be one. So as an example of some of the challenges that we've had to overcome in developing that vertical is polar bears. So polar bears to one particular company is a negative, but for Coca-Cola, polar bears are pretty cool. So we had to make sure that Orenda was able to take that and measure it appropriately. And why is it important that we start doing these industry averages and get all this data? It's really important to different companies because they'll be able to show a comparison when it comes to permit approvals and government regulations and all those types of things. You want to know how your brand is building and what the momentum is so that you can have it validates what you're doing in different communities. One of the other cool things that we're doing is there's a sports team, looking at the brand of a particular sports team. And then looking at the brands of individual players. I mean, we've all seen it before, how an individual team player, their brand actually pulls up the team's brand, or in some cases pulls it down, depending on the individual and the circumstances. So be able to demonstrate what the correlations are between individual players and the team brands themselves. And why is that important? It's really important when it comes to trading time and when it comes to contract negotiations, those types of things, because it puts a value on something that didn't really exist before, a value specifically to brand and to the momentum and the correlations.
That's fantastic. When I think about this, when I think about bears, I always think of, when you said that, I thought about Stephen Colbert, who had an ongoing thing about not liking bears, so it wouldn't be part of his brand. The other thing I thought about was on the way in here, I was looking at some billboards they had for Billy Bishop Airport and listening to the ads that they had, which were very, very targeted towards this idea that Billy Bishop Airport is my airport and how it helps the ecosystem, so it gets people out of Toronto to these other places really quickly. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. They've taken what is effectively a negative in many parts of, for many people in Toronto, and turned it into a real positive. And I think, wow, that's a brilliant use of trying to reposition the brand. So I'd like to see what Twitter might say about that. So talking about Twitter and how you get at Twitter, maybe Anton, could you talk a bit about your Profile Words app and what that's all about?
So the Profile Words app was really like a little hobby app. I have a background in UX as well as development. I was leading a UX team, and I wanted to find some competitive analysis using Twitter. So I had this hypothesis that we make networks on Twitter, like we follow people for a reason, we have followers for a reason, and I wanted to try and find out what those reasons were. And I thought that our biographies probably give a clue to what those are. So Profile Words is a really simple tool that mops up the biographies of your followers or the people you're following, and gives you the most frequently occurring words in it in the group. And it reveals a lot. It's like a really simple premise, but it can reveal quite a lot about a brand or a politician or a friend, a prospective person that you might want to follow, a celebrity. And then I layer on top of that personality insights, which starts to look at the level of emotionality that those things are written at with, or the level of extroversion. So it was really a kind of selfish little experiment, but we're using it actually inside IBM now to work with our marketing.
I think this is a great example of this concept of taking data of one sort and mixing it with another, which is this idea of taking Twitter insights, maybe taking that and then applying personality insights to it. And there are all kinds of use cases for this. Twitter is an incredible means of bringing people together, providing profiles of people and like thinking and so forth, for good and bad, because actually there are some elements there about what's happening in the U.S. election, which kind of indicate that it's actually group hoarding of the same people all kind of talking to themselves rather than necessarily talking to everyone else. But it's still interesting in terms of what it can do and what it can do for the interactions that you might want to create. So if you're going to go create it, I'd go to the garage, and maybe Rick can give us a couple of points about the garage in terms of what it could use, what it could do for people who have great ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got lots of clients we can't talk about, but we also have a couple clients we can. So let me give an example of one. This is Manulife, insurance company you've all probably heard of. They're sort of near and dear to our heart. They were our first client in the garage when the San Francisco garage launched about 2 years ago. We've now got 5 garages worldwide. Toronto's one of them. We had an engagement with Manulife beginning of this year, and it was a really great example of the way we work in the garage. So they had this particular business problem, and their business problem was that the head of their common IT infrastructure, he didn't like getting calls from other parts of his business accusing him of his infrastructure being slow or being down. Whenever any application is down, the first instinct is to blame the outage on the IT guy. He wanted to be the use case he came to us with. He said he wants to be able to, while the person's calling him, be able to get a complete diagnosis of his entire infrastructure and be able to provide an answer to the person on the phone yes, it's our fault, our infrastructure's down, or no, it's not, and this is how we know. So we engaged with them. We did a design thinking workshop. That's how we start all of our engagements, and that's how we get from business problem to a definition of the minimum viable product that we could build, and then we partnered with them and actually built this out. It was a 4-week engagement. The developers, designer, business leader from Manulife, all in the same room for these 4 weeks, and we built production-ready code that we deployed to his phone, and now he's got this application that he can monitor his infrastructure anywhere in the world on the spot. And in this entire engagement, 4 weeks of development, not a single defect was filed against us. That's the power of doing pair programming. Again, I haven't really introduced that, but we could talk about it at the booth if anyone wants to.
I think that this is I think this is actually profound. Now, this is interesting because it's okay. So, some guy wanting to monitor his IT and so forth and be able to get answers. But the applicability to all kinds of scenarios is very broad. I'll tell you an example around telcos, for instance. Every one of us has probably the experience of working with our telecoms provider, and you get mad in one way or another. You call them up and you go through that hell through the phone system, get it put on hold forever, and then amazingly sometime you'll get an answer. The ability to use technologies like this to be able to identify who's calling, what are the likely things that they're calling about, doing tone analysis to determine how angry is somebody, what is it that they're about. Being able to pull that stuff together can be incredibly powerful as an interaction. And for you, if you're going to build interactions with customers, the ability to be able to pull all that data and to be able to navigate your way through becomes extremely important. So I think that this is we're onto something. I think that's pretty interesting. So let me just kind of finish off and ask some questions about what kind of technology are you using. You're using some IBM technology, and this will be my little ad point here, guys. So bear with me a minute.
Well, SoftLayer and IBM Bluemix are key for us, especially for our future, because we're exploring, and that would be really what would be driving the innovation, we believe, is using Watson and exploring how we can take all this data that we're accumulating and what we can do with it. So we're looking at utilizing Watson's intelligence to be able to maybe come up with an automated campaigns to see what are the flaws within the execution process from the head office and the retailer perspective, and what's the response at the consumer level, and how Watson can help us bridge those gaps. Similar to maybe the way IBM Watson is creating its own recipes. Maybe there will be one day when IBM Watson creates its own campaigns. So that's all in the future, but that's something we're working on and experimenting with.
Yeah, just the point about the recipes. We have this thing called Chef Watson, which basically looks at different food combinations. So food is interesting because there's a reason why certain foods have become so popular around the world, that over time, people have learned that this combination of this food with this food just makes a wonderful match. And but actually, if you give a computer the ability to do this, and you say, I got kind of a lemony flavor or something like this, Watson can go actually find combinations that you've never heard of before that will be all these wild and great combinations of things, which just actually combine flavors. So that's a little use case there. Sabbagh, how about you? What kind of technology are you using?
For starters, because we're only creating content in social media, we're basically writing on all the platforms that exist. But one of the things that we learned over the last 2 years is when you have content that becomes popular, if you can aggregate all that content in one place and then put that in front of another audience, it becomes even more popular. So we're going to be putting Tech Portfolio on Bluemix, and then we're going to be using different kinds of artificial intelligence applications. Sometimes it's how to structure the actual writing of a tweet. Should you put the city name at the front or at the back? Looking at the topics, look at how we rank against other cities. But also, when you're looking at how you rank against other cities, it's one thing to have an audience, but the audience often changes when you're working live. So we're now looking at how do we create insights real time so that our editorial team can make very quick decisions whenever we're covering an event live.
That sounds awesome. 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 Tanya, how about you? What kind of technologies are you using?
We're using SoftLayer, and we're also doing some of the Bluemix. And when I was thinking about earlier about why we stocked IBM until they allow us to use all their services, was it's kind of like Legos when I was a kid, building something new. So you start out with your own infrastructure, but you want to be able to add on new things and have the ability to switch around. And that's what we saw as the benefit with what's provided at IBM. One of the things that we're doing is the Personality Insights tool, which is really cool. We are very much into the social science, so we want to be able to show what the personality was of different shareholders within different customer sets. And the personality analysis tool allowed us to do that. So we've integrated that tool into our software. We are also going to use it to help customers identify trolls because they're day-to-day sadists and have a huge digital footprint. We think that we're going to be able to identify them and help manage them. So those are just some of the things that we're doing.
Okay, excellent. I'm not going to ask you guys what IBM technology you're using because I think we'll know that. But what I will want to ask everybody is, what's your vision? What's your vision of the future? Where do you think? Put yourself out 5 years and think about the last 5 years in terms of what's happened with technology. But put yourself out 5 years. What do you see with your platform? What do you see with the world in general?
Well, I truly believe that, it's obvious. We're living in an interconnected world, and I think one of the bigger things that are going to happen within years to come is really connecting enterprise technologies for them to be able to collaborate and integrate with each other in a fashion like consumer technology does. Is now where we have a lot of enterprise solutions, and they're working in the silos, and that creates a lot of noise within the process of implementations and really just daily operations. So I can see how more and more systems would be becoming more of a platform interaction, similar to maybe Sabaa.com, which is a platform that allows for product sharing information. So I can see how more of those kind of integrations will be happening, and it would be easy and simple for any user on a business level to add any solutions to their suite of businesses and things that they're using. So the IT decisions would be simple, like consumer decisions, but the sophistication would be on a very enterprise level.
Right.
So I can see how things are going that way, and then a lot of intelligence and analytics that would provide instant decisions, help with instant decisions on that matter.
So I think that I'm going to steal a quote that I got from Anton earlier, that it's all about making technology invisible. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but I think it's actually right on, and it hits at what Yulia is talking about. Sabbagh, how about you? What do you see in the next 5 years? Where would you like to be in 5 years?
Well, if Watson can play Jeopardy and if Watson can make recipes, I'd like Watson as a journalist on our team. So we see a day where we've got 5 pretty powerful managing editors, but to have an AI-driven editor to help us cover, we've created content in over 40 cities worldwide. Having something that can think faster and smarter, maybe not more creatively, but maybe as creatively, would definitely enhance the intensity and the capability of the team.
Right. That's actually a very good point. One question people often ask is, well, is artificial intelligence, is it going to take away jobs? No. What it will do is it will enhance our decisions. It will enhance our jobs. It will give us the ability to actually do things that we haven't done before. So from an editor's point of view, having a machine doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have that. There are certain things that it can't do. But in the hands of somebody who has that capability, and to have an assistant who can help it can be a powerful, powerful thought. And I think that's kind of the direction that you would go in that. And Tanya?
I guess there's 2 things I'd like to say really quickly, and one is that for our software itself and the industry where we're playing in, the thought is that before leaders didn't really have the ability to make decisions in real time in the way that they are required now, and being able to give them software that does that to help them well, like we said before, when you know better, you do better. To bring that to society and live in better communities, that's one thing. The other is what IBM is doing and for startup community, and that is being collaborative, providing different tools so that we don't have to build them. And I see society itself also doing that we become more collaborative. Startups start, it's almost like a depot of different tools that we can add together to become more effective and more efficient in the industries that we're in.
Wow, I like that concept. When you know better, you do better. And think about that in terms of what we could do with the world if the world actually knew better. Maybe we actually could solve some problems. Anton, how about you? What's your view of 5 years from now?
So the thing that I'm most interested in at the moment is hyper-personalization. So uniquely personalized experiences for each of us. The one thing about Watson is, although cognitive computing is a really big phrase, it's pretty easy to use. It's a single line of code to get personality insights. So when you combine the Internet of Things technology, knowing where you are, personality insights, knowing who you are, and health and fitness data, knowing how you are, I think that you can start to tailor really unique experiences for the first time on a grand scale, and that's where I sort of see the future of software going.
Fantastic. Rick, you're going to answer the final question. What's your vision of where we're going to be, where you're going to be in 5 years?
Absolutely. So, I mean, as a designer, to me, it's not about technology, it's not about things, it's about people. In the last couple of years, we've seen this transformation that companies are beginning to realize this, and you need to solve people's problems in order to be successful. To tie it back to Graham's opening remarks, he talked about the entrepreneur, the developer, and the designers being the three key roles and skills. What I see in the next 5 years is that those walls begin falling down. It's not a group of business people that understand business and a group of technologists and a group of designers. You're going to have people that understand all of these, and that's going to allow us to bring all of these things together to solve the really important problems.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're pretty much out of time here, folks. I just do want to make that point, though, that if you want to look at where you want to invest your time, and if you want to come up with a solution, find two other friends. If you're the designer, find a good entrepreneur and a developer. If you're a developer, find the other two, and vice versa. Do that, and I think you'll be set. Last point is about building with innovation with IBM. IBM's a 105-year-old company. We've changed ourselves many, many, many times from being makers of butcher scales and weighing equipment for all kinds of businesses to computers. We're not hardly in the computer business. Well, large end servers we are, but we got out of the personal computer business. We've got out of that. But clearly where we are is in this area of cognitive computing, in cloud computing, and engagement. And if you join us in working with us, we would love to work with you to help to build some engaging, interactive solutions. So thank you very much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Please go over to the IBM booth. I think you've got some little things to fill out so that you can get some goodies. So please give us some comments. We'd love to get some comments from you. And have a great conference. Thank you.